because I didn't turn that on. But it was recorded, right? Does that mean people here didn't hear?
I mean, people removed it not here. So we start.
Okay. Take two. Sorry about that. Welcome and thank you for attending today's rulemaking hearing. My name is Ridgely Mock and I've been designated to serve as the hearing officer for this hearing. The hearing is being held to receive public comment on rules proposed by the Department of Environmental Services, specifically Env-Wq 1500, relative to requirements for alteration of terrain permits and consultation with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. The rulemaking notice for this rule was published in the New Hampshire Rulemaking Register on August 26, 2021, as notice number 2021-87. This hearing is being held today, Tuesday, September 28th, at 2 p.m. in person at the Concord offices of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and contemporaneously using the WebEx remote platform. The notice provided information for the public to access the meeting in person, by computer, or by phone. If anyone has any problem accessing the meeting, please call Tom Taggart at 603-271-8156 or send him an email at the following address, thomas.taggart, that's spelled T-A-G-G-A-R-T, @des.nh.gov. Anyone wishing to make oral comments or to submit written comments on the proposed rule for the department's consideration may do so during this hearing. Written comments on the rule submitted to the department by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, October 6, 2021 will also be considered. After the close of the comment period, the department will consider all comments received and will decide whether to revise the rule in response to the comments. The department will file its final proposed rule for consideration by the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules and will post the final proposed rule on our online rulemaking page. The earliest date at which the rule will be on the JL CAR for review would be at its November 18, 2021 meeting, although that date is subject to change. Briefly, the alteration of terrain rules establish the information that must be included in a permit application for alteration of terrain, as well as the criteria that must be met before the department will issue a permit under RSA 485-A:17. This proposal readopts with amendment Env-Wq 1503.08, additional information required for AoT permit applications, Env-Wq 1503.19, criteria for issuance of AoT permits, and Env-Wq 1503.22, amended permits for modifications to approved projects. This proposal also readopts with amendment and makes technical revisions to Env-Wq 1504.09, stormwater drainage report, drainage area plans, and hydrologic soil group plans, and Env-Wq 1504.13, infiltration feasibility report. The proposal eliminates the requirement in Env-Wq 1503.19H that requires every applicant to perform a study and provide a report performed by a wildlife biologist. The proposal adopts a new requirement in Env-Wq 15.33 that requires an applicant to request consultation with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department whenever the Natural Heritage Bureau database records or identifies threatened or endangered species in the vicinity of the proposed project, and also if New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services receives evidence verified by New Hampshire Fish and Game Department of any state or federally listed threatened or endangered wildlife species in the vicinity of the project. The proposal also adopts requirements in Env-Wq 1504.18 that all plans contain wildlife protection notes, and for those projects that require consultation with New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, the plans must also contain a list of all conservation measures recommended by New Hampshire Fish and Game. Lastly, the proposal adopts new requirements in Env-Wq 1506.15 for manufactured erosion and sediment control products. The process for these types of hearings is set by law and rule. For those of you who have not participated in a public hearing before, I'd like to take a minute to explain what this hearing is and is not. This hearing is for the state to receive comments from the public on the proposed project. What this hearing is not for is for questions or back and forth discussion. However, please be assured that DES is taking this process very seriously. We have read all of the public comments already provided and look forward to receiving your comments today. At this point, I would also like to mention the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department will be holding a rulemaking public hearing on Thursday, September 30th, 2021 at 2 p.m. at their Concord office, 11 Hazen Drive, Concord, New Hampshire, to receive comment on proposed Fish and Game administrative rules which describe the requirements and process for persons or entities to consult with New Hampshire Fish and Game Department if required by a state agency as part of a request for issuance of a permit, approval, or other written authorization from that state agency. The proposed New Hampshire Fish and Game administrative rules may apply to some alteration of terrain permit applications. And as I believe I noted at the beginning, this hearing is being recorded. I will now turn back over to Tom Taggart, who can provide an overview on the logistics for those participating remotely.
Thanks, Reg. So we just had the introduction by the presiding officer, and now I'm going to step through some logistical slides for those who are remote. So if you have any technical difficulties, as Rich said, please give me an email at thomas.taggart, T-A-G-G-A-R-T, at des.nh.gov, or give me a call at 603-271-8156. So there are two ways to handle audio. You can use computer audio, or you can call in yourself using the phone number and the access code provided in the public notice. If you've logged on to the WebEx interface, you can switch between audio by clicking on the three dots and the circle at the bottom of your screen. You'll get a pop-up that will allow you to switch between audio options, and you can choose to do computer audio or call in. If you click the view button next to call in, it will provide you with the same number and access code as was listed in the public notice. So if you do choose to use computer audio and you find that the connection is not great, you can switch to call in. If you do call in, though, please mute your speakers so that all sound is coming out of your phone, so we don't get bad feedback issues when it comes time for you to submit a comment if you wish to do so. So chat and question options have been turned off. Remote attendees will need to indicate that they wish to submit a comment by raising their hand. We will watch for raised hands and then call upon each attendee who raises their hand. When you're done with the comment, please lower your hand, and if you want to submit another comment later on, raise it again later. But don't leave your hand up the entire time, as it'll be hard to keep track of who has provided a comment. So for phone-only attendees, you can raise and lower your hands by pressing *3. You can mute and unmute yourself by doing *6 if you're phone only. WebEx app and WebEx browser interface can raise hands by finding the symbol next to their name on the participant panel. I'm going to step through that very quickly. So, you can get this participants panel by clicking the participants button that might be in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You click that, and you'll have this panel pop open. If you hover next to your name, you'll see a symbol appear, and that will allow you to click on it and indicate that you're raising your hand to submit a comment. Clicking on it again will lower it. So this is kind of similar between the app and the browser interface. It looks slightly different. Sorry for jumping around here. Once again, you want to find that symbol and click on it to raise it, and click it again to lower it. Now in the browser interface, you're going to look for the three dots where you might have changed your audio. You're going to see an option to raise your hand in that pop-up in the browser interface. So once again, submitting comments, all attendees are muted upon joining. You'll be identified and unmuted from our side. You may be prompted to unmute yourself. Please do so if you're prompted. When you're unmuted, please state your name and any affiliation, and the presiding officer will let you know when you're nearing the end of your 5-minute comment period. So once again, just for call-in only attendees, *3 to raise and lower your hand, *6 to mute and unmute yourself. So here's a quick look at the agenda once again. Back over to you, Rich.
Okay, thank you, Tom. At this point, I'm going to open the floor for public comments on the proposed rules. The order of speakers will be those who are attending in person who wish to speak, and then we'll call on those attending remotely in the order in which their hands were raised. Prior to speaking, I ask that each participant state their name and affiliation for the record. And once again, please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Once you've been speaking for 4 minutes, I will ask you to please wrap up. Once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, if time permits, people will be given an opportunity to provide additional comments. I did have up front a sign-up sheet. I'm going to start with that, but certainly sign-up sheet for speakers. Do you have some as well, Beth Ann? Okay. And there's 3 people on the list, but please just raise your hand after I've called on these 3, and you certainly will have an opportunity to share your comments. First I have here is Suzanne Fournier of Brock's Environmental Citizens, and I'd also like to mention, for anyone who wants to share further in the back, if you could please move forward a little bit just to make sure your comments can be recorded. Thank you. Suzanne?
Good afternoon, Mr. Moss. As you said, Suzanne Fournier from Milford, coordinator of Brock's Environmental Citizens. We're working to protect wetlands and wildlife in special places around New Hampshire, and the Milford-Brock townland is one of those special places. My brief comments at this hearing will be followed up with more in writing. So unfortunately, your rules reflect that you don't really want to find out if there are T&E species on a particular site, and you don't really want to know how T&E species are using the site. Getting rid of the wildlife habitat assessment, what you refer to as the study, is not only a bad idea, I don't believe it is supported by the statute. Wanting to rely again on the Natural Heritage Bureau database is wrong. As DES's Mr. Pelletier explained to the Senate committee on SB 129, he said, well, he's reported in the minutes as saying, the Natural Heritage Bureau's database identifies species that people have seen. It does not provide total coverage of the state. Administrative rules required an AoT permit applicant to hire a wildlife biologist, as that biologist could make an assessment and put any necessary findings into the database. He said that on February 9, 2021. Mr. Pelletier expressed the need to have the wildlife assessment. He expressed it very well. As of October 9, the New Hampshire Endangered Species Conservation Act will incorporate the word appreciably, which means to notice and to make measurements. Therefore, there's no escaping the need to take notice and to measure how a project would impact T&E species. That means keep the study requirement that you have had in place for over a year. You are worried about the log jam, but Fish and Game is hiring 3 staff members to help with their reviews. The log jam problem will diminish and disappear while allowing Fish and Game to adequately review effects of projects on T&E. Your rules mistakenly support a standard of avoiding, minimizing, or mitigating. The statute instead requires projects to avoid and minimize harm to T&E species. See the bill, see the law. Avoid harm is easy to understand. You cannot harm the species at all. The other aspect is that in order to minimize harm, you must not jeopardize the species' existence by not reducing the likelihood of their survival and recovery. That is, a project must minimize harm down to the point that it does not reduce the reproduction, the numbers, or distribution of that species. That's according to Fish and Game's definition of of jeopardize the continued existence of T&E species. Last point is this: can there be unavoidable impacts that DES would agree to mitigate when the underlying statute, 212A, the New Hampshire Endangered Species Conservation Act, it requires that all actions by DES be designed to avoid harm and minimize harm to the point that the project has no negative impact on a species' viability. By law, projects must avoid harm, therefore there cannot logically be any permit that allows unavoidable harm. So that's all I have for now, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Was I under 5 minutes?
Well, I believe so. I forgot to start the timer, so.
Was I?
No, I believe you were
Thank you.
within the 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So Tom is suggesting that the future people sit in the chair right behind the speaker.
We could hear you, Suzanne, but we want to make sure other people who give testimony sit in this chair.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what he was saying,
Yeah.
everybody pull up.
Yeah.
But I was okay.
You were good, we could hear you.
Very good,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, thank you, Suzanne. Next I have signed up is Gary Abbott of the Associated General Contractors of New Hampshire.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Gary Abbott. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Associated General Contractors of New Hampshire. We appreciate the opportunity here to speak on these rules. We also appreciate what the department has done to try to amend the rules since 2019. We have supported the 2 previous versions, and we're here today in support of fixing the rules because there still is problems with getting timely AoT permits through the process. With that, I want to tell you that we went through a process of association of putting together contractors, consultants, specialists that go through the AoT process to review the rules. And I have some very specific language changes and recommendations today, and I plan to hand in this testimony today. And let me start with Rule 1503.08B, the data check request results. Number 2, there's a sentence that talks about identifies the New Hampshire database records and threatened or endangered species in the vicinity of the project and assesses the potential impacts the project will have on the identified species. The technical people that we represent stated that the database heritage records, you don't get an assessment when you get that report. This seems to be asking for something that that report doesn't get. We recommend you stop at the word vicinity of the project. We think a period there because what you're asking for next is not something you get with that database check. Also in that sentence, we just like the department to consider more clarity in the word vicinity. I think people have different interpretations of what vicinity means, and I think that would be very helpful. Moving on to that same section under 1503.08, number N. For projects that require the submissions, it asks for a copy of all relevant correspondence with the Fish and Game from the, it asks for all relevant submissions and discussions with Fish and Game to be submitted. We have a recommendation to clarify that. We think that we put in language to remove the word relevant, make it all correspondence with New Hampshire Fish and Game from the date of the data check. This will make it consistent and easy for applicants to understand. Also, this adds a lot of clarity where it won't be a huge undertaking of research. Once you start the process, your first step is to do the data check. This just adds clarity to what would be provided to DES. The next comment is under 1503.19H. There's a sentence that goes on that the applicant has incorporated into the project design all conservation measures recommended by the Fish and Game. to assure the project does not jeopardize the continued existence of threatened and endangered species. At first, we started to question this language because it starts to have the DES, it almost makes a new classification where jeopardize is really under the Fish and Game rules. It's not part of the DES. So we just think it doesn't match either the statute, and it may conflict with what Fish and Game decides to do under does not jeopardize. So we came up with a recommendation under H for any project that requires consultation with Fish and Game pursuant to Rule 1503.33. The applicant has incorporated those recommendations into the project. We think that's a lot cleaner. We won't get into interpretations of what Fish and Game did under their rules, and we won't be in conflict with the RSA statute 212A9 Roman 3. And last, I hope I'm not up against the 5 minutes, but the last one is under 1503:22 amended. We want the same change that we're recommending in language, that the correspondence that you require goes from the date of the data check, where the applicant first starts the process. And with that, thank you again for the department to work on these rules over the last summer and put these together. We appreciate it. We recognize that we still have permit issues in trying to get these out. We also understand how the two departments are going to work together and how this goes. So we plan to make comments at the Fish and Game rules hearing as well. But with that, I would give you my written testimony, and again, appreciate it, Ridge, for listening to me today.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Thank you. Okay, and next we have Barbara, is it Richter?
Richter, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rich. My name is Barbara Richter, and I'm the Executive Director at the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide comment on the rules today. I know this has been a long process, and I appreciate everybody's time, so thank you again. And I just have a few general comments and then a couple more specific ones. Generally, I think it's unfortunate that you've completely removed all mention of protection of habitat, or in the strikeout section where modification of habitat or destruction or modification has been removed. I think it really is disappointing to see that. I know that we did provide comments earlier and asked that you specifically address habitat in this. There's many points on dealing with stormwater and runoff and erosion, and I would think that perhaps you could include habitat. So that's a more general comment, but more specifically, the other thing we asked for was a little bit more clarity on when Fish and Game is triggered when the consultation happens, and that seems to be with the New Hampshire Heritage Bureau identification. That seems to be clear, but it seems to just kind of hang out there as to not to be very specific on what triggers that consultation with Fish and Game. I also, let's see, I do agree with Mr. Abbott's suggestions on page 5 that for projects requiring consultation with Fish and Game in accordance with Env-Wq 1503-33, a copy of all relevant correspondence with New Hampshire Fish and Game. This, I feel, is vague as well, and it seems to kind of put that decision-making process on the applicant as to what is relevant, so that could be tricky. And I think other than that, my comments were mostly general, so I'll leave it with that, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, those are the three that I had or signed up. Is there anyone else here today in person who would like to make comment? Okay, seeing none at this time, I'm going to ask Tom Taggart if you could open it up to, or begin with those who raised their hands participating remotely.
Sure thing. Thanks, Ridge. So if anybody wants to raise their hand to provide a comment remotely right now, please do so, and I'll be able to see that. I'll share here the presentation once again, the slides with the instructions. So you're looking for next to your name in the attendees list or participants list. If you hover your mouse to the right of your name, you'll see, a symbol appear that will look like a little hand, and that's what you'll click to raise your hand. So if you've called in, once again, the way to do that is through *3, and then muting and unmuting yourself will be through *6. Everyone is muted right now, and I will unmute people as they raise their hands, and then you may also have to unmute yourself, so be prepared to do that. So far, Ridge, I'm not seeing any raised hands, but I want to give it some time in case people are navigating the interface. All right, we see one raised hand from a John Tuthill or Tuthill. John, I'm going to unmute you. You may also need to unmute yourself. Please remember to state your name and any affiliation after you've been unmuted.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
This is John Tuthill, citizen, live in Ackworth, New Hampshire. And I've been following with interest a proposed landfill development up in Coos County. My concern has to do with any standards which may apply for an alteration of terrain permits involved with that project or projects of that magnitude. And I think that really is the issue I would like DES to be considering, is that standards remain as stringent as possible with projects of a major or potentially a major impact. I don't know if you would want to be setting that to a number of acres disturbed, but I would like to propose that DES consider that, and with projects of large impact, say over 3 acres, over 5 acres, the most stringent standard possible be retained in the rules. And that is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
So, Ridge, at this time, we're not seeing any other hands right now.
Okay. I guess at this point then, and certainly jump in, Tom, if you see another hand raised. While I ask once again if there's anyone here in person who would like to provide any further comment or initial comment. Suzanne?
Hello, Suzanne Fournier again, Boston Environmental Citizens. Just additional comment based on what Barbara Richter said. Of course, you pointed out that in your rules you got rid of the habitat portion. It's in the law. It says all such action that DES would take is designed to avoid and minimize harm to such species and habitat designated as critical. I noticed that right away weeks back when I reviewed your initial proposal. It jumped right out. It's a phrase right in the statute. I don't think you can eliminate it in your rulemaking. Habitat designated as critical. And then Fish and Game on Thursday, they're going to go over their rules where they define what is critical habitat. It's finally getting defined. It hadn't been previously. So, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Suzanne. And is there anybody else here in person who would like to share? Okay, Tom, did you have any additional hands raised?
There are no additional hands at this time, and I was just sharing the instructions again in case those were needed.
Okay, well, seeing no one else wishes to comment, I'm going to close the hearing at this point. I remind you that written comments can be submitted on or before 4 p.m. on October 6th, 2021. Thank you, everyone, for attending and participating in this hearing.
Thank you. It's going to go on record as one of